And it's like, if you're so outraged by this offense of supporting Hamas, well, then okay, but how is that not enough of a reason to cut off support to Israel then? Actually supporting Hamas gets you billions in American aid.
Dave Smith recently ripped into Israel defenders who look the other way at the track record of Israel's support for Hamas, don't have an answer for it, often make excuses for it. This is in the context of a clip between a debate between Adam Friedland and Richie Torres. Let's get his take on this. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
The Israeli government, Hamas wants to eradicate the Jewish people and the Jewish state. Is that right?
That's what Hamas has said, yeah.
Okay. Then why would they directly give Hamas money, literally bags of cash in suitcases through the Qataris? Nearly, I think, over $1 billion in cash during this last 17 years.
That's a fair point. It's a great question.
If one of those kids at Columbia wrote a $5 check to Hamas, you'd say send them to Gitmo for being a terrorist.
It's a fair point.
Does that make Benjamin Netanyahu a terrorist? He's supporting terror.
The United States, it seems to me, the United States and Israel could have shut off the spigot and did not do so. I don't know why, but that was a failure. There's no question.
The Israeli government.
All right. Yeah, that was, I've personally kind of like, I've mentioned this many times. And I've done a lot of like Israel debates over the last couple years, and I've brought this up a lot in a lot of them, and there is simply just never a response. And I at least appreciate Richard Torre just waving the white flag and going, "Yep, you will not get a response from me." But of course, as I always say, this is why this is such an amazing clip. That's really a devastating blow to their, like, you simply don't get to not have a response to that. This is crazy. Like, I remember when I'm trying to think of like all the responses I get. I remember what Dennis Prager tried his best, where he goes, "Well, we partnered with the commies to beat the Nazis because sometimes you have to make these calculations." And you're like, no, that's not the calculation here. This isn't. However you feel about partnering with the commies, this isn't, there are two evil groups. We partner with the one who we think is less evil to beat the one who we think is more evil, which let's just say there's some problems using that justification for World War II as well. But this is propping up intentionally the worst group.
Yeah, it is, and, I guess they'll say the Palestinian Authority is worse, but they label Hamas terrorists when it comes to funding from other regimes. They always say that Hamas is the proxy of Iran, so, by fighting Iran, we're fighting Hamas. Well, Hamas then is the proxy of Israel then, too. $1.8 billion transferred to Hamas by Netanyahu, sometimes in suitcases. Even the banks in Israel didn't want to facilitate this. There's a long documented track record of this. There is in the BB files a video clip of Netanyahu explaining it himself, saying, "We control the height of the flames," and saying this is likened to the Godfather's mantra in the movie The Godfather, that, keep your enemies close, or your friends close, but your enemies closer. He boasted about this strategy to destabilize the Palestinian Authority and never to allow a two-state solution to prevail or even be a possibility. So this is the most damning part of the Israel first mentality. They don't have any answers for it. Dave's right. They should have answers for it. For heaven's sake, this is absurd when you can get away with bombing other countries on the excuse that they fund Hamas, but you don't have any explanation about why Israel funded Hamas. Netanyahu never has any answers for this either. I did see the Trigonometry podcast ask him about this, and he just said, well, it's hogwash, and just moved on to a different point. So, they literally don't have answers to it.
So that you can say, look how terrible these people are who supported this group. That is a whole different thing. And That is, I mean, I got to say, Adam did a very good job there with the point that, like, yeah, you know, you have people are being deported, you know, and legal residents have been deported because they supposedly support Hamas. But actually supporting Hamas gets you billions in American aid.
That's true. The deportations have been selective on that mentality, and they'll just say your words, you know, your criticisms of Israel, if you're a legal resident that doesn't have to be a citizen yet, supports Hamas. What does $1.8 billion do?
So what's up with that? You know, and I mean, there's so much about this. Just knowing this one detail about the conflict, it does. Like, I'm not sure I could think of an example. I guess like the thing that comes to mind is almost like when they were trying to justify the vaccine passports. And then, you know, they would use the thing of like, you know, if you you have to get the vaccine because if you get it, you can't get COVID and you're completely safe. And then they'd go, but we have to protect the vaccinated people in the restaurant from unvaccinated people coming in. And you're like, but I thought your whole case relied on the vaccine being protection. Like, but it's hard to think of another one where there's just like, if you know this one piece of information, it's just like there's like walls of narrative around you, and this one fact just shatters all the narratives. Like they all just fall to pieces. Because like, I'm sorry, but you can't, you know, fuck, I forget who it was who said it. God damn it, this is a really good quote, and I'm sorry for not crediting whoever it might be Aaron Mattei. I think it might have been an Aaron Mattei quote, but he said that the entire justification for Israel's war is basically it relies on the idea that nothing can justify October 7th, and October 7th justifies anything.
Well, isn't that the Israel First Zionist mentality? October 7th is supposed to give them supreme plenary authority to wipe the Palestinians off the map, kill hundreds of thousands, probably more than that, dead right now, displaced, without property. Gaza in ruins, that's where they live their lives, you know, for the last 80 years, most of them. And we're just supposed to pretend that, you know, this response is appropriate if you're an American bankrolling this and our criminal government feeding into this and looking the other way at this, not using its own leverage to cut off aid if they don't stop this madness and they don't stop attacking their neighbors, expanding the West Bank settlements in Syria and Lebanon. That's what we're expected to believe, that all of history in that conflict began on October 7th. It wasn't a massive globalist land grab by the UN in 47 and 48, and, you know, nothing disturbed the Israelis prior to October 7th. Beyond that, we know that Mossad knew about the October 7th attack as much as a year in advance. That's been widely reported in Israeli media. We know that the Egyptians tipped them off 3 days prior. It seems to be that there's a plausible case they let this happen to preserve the political ambitions and political stature of Netanyahu, who was going to go down for corruption and fraud charges otherwise. And there's still charges against him that have been delayed over and over, presumably because he starts all these wars and enacts a genocide. And, you know, they want to rally around Netanyahu in large numbers, but there are some protesters of it too.
You know, which, like, when you think about it, is a pretty wild train of thought. But the whole idea that like October 7th was so horrible, and so the group who did that must be removed from power, and I'm sorry if some innocent civilians get killed along the way, but that group is so bad and they did this to us that we have a right to now destroy you to get to them. That whole, which, look, that just doesn't, that's not justified on the face of it, but that whole thing is really destroyed when you find out that actually you were keeping those guys in power so that you could use them as an excuse to never give these people their freedom to begin with.
That's exactly right. The whole thing falls apart when Israel bankrolled Hamas, part of it, the financier. That whole narrative is just shattered in that, let alone all the other things that we've talked about on this program.
Sorry. That changes the equation drastically. Yeah, I was talking about this on Rogan's podcast the other day, but it was like when I just said the thing, like Ronald Reagan came up and we were just talking about I think, or Iran Contra came up or whatever. And I was just talking about how like they were shipping cocaine into the United States of America, or at the very least allowing it to be shipped in. Although there's been real deal allegations that it was much more than just allowing it, like that they were involved in shipping it in while they're ramping up the war on drugs. It's like you're going around and prosecuting some dude with 5 rocks in his pocket on the corner of the hood somewhere. You're throwing the book at him, and then yet you're letting this off. It's like, when you'd see like, the lengths that they went through to prosecute the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th, the lengths, like the facial recognition technology and all of that and all this stuff. And then you look at like
And then you look at like Ray Epps and the entrapment scheme and the pipe bombs that were there that they still don't have explanations for. And Dave's right. The duplicity and treachery in the 1980s with the drug war while you're smuggling cocaine in, it just exposes the rank hypocrisy of our criminal government. And it's applied domestically as much as it's deployed in foreign policy in the Israel first mentality. Certainly so. The government is above the law. That is why it's a criminal government. It's illegitimate because it has powers that we don't have individually to just induce and perpetuate and, unveil the worst crimes against humanity, and they don't have to face justice for it ever. They have legal immunity from it.
They're doing with like crime in major cities. And it's just like, there's like, you can just, a lot of times you can just look at something and see where the political will is. And it's like, if you're so outraged by this offense of supporting Hamas, well then, okay, but how is that not enough of a reason to cut off support to Israel then? It's just, it makes no sense. Like, in the same sense that you go like, how can the Reagan administration say that shipping cocaine into the United States of America is an acceptable, trade-off, and also say that we have like any moral right to throw an American citizen in jail for decades for the crime of getting the stuff and distributing it once we've distributed it in? It's just too wild. The contradiction is too much.
Yeah, that contradiction is too much support for Hamas is. This is an absurd angle that's almost never exposed to the United States and to pro-Zionist forces. Basically, no one has to answer for it. No one has excuses for it. Dave's right. When they are confronted with this, either they say, good question, like Representative Torres, or they just skirt the issue. Netanyahu, the one time recently I've seen him asked about it, and he should be asked about it by every single media agent, Netanyahu just said it was hogwash and moved on, even though it's widely documented. They exchanged money with Qatar to give to Hamas 2 weeks before October 7th. This led all the way up until that point. But they never have to explain this. They never have to go back on this. What's clear is he believed that this would mean that there's no negotiating partner in Gaza to negotiate for a 2-state solution. The Palestinian Authority was not going to be able to withstand the rise and ascension and power of this group once they had $1.8 billion to play with. They would just, destabilize that entire faction of Israel's populace, if you call it a faction, notwithstanding the fact that Hamas was controversial even amongst the Palestinian Authority. And when they say those people elected Hamas, that is a farce too. It's like saying, well, the United States elected Biden, 4 years ago, so it should be genocided by a criminal entity. No. And half the people in Gaza are children that didn't even have the right to vote in 2005 or 2006 or whatever it was. And of those that did, probably a minority voted for Hamas. That does not mean or justify atrocities against that people. It's so ridiculous. It's so preposterous to believe that, genocide is just, a given if you vote for the wrong party, even if that party is supported by, now, in regard to today's population, a minority supported it back 20 years ago, 19 years ago. So that's where we are. Israel Firsters don't have an excuse for this. They never did. They don't have an excuse for the disproportionate attack against the Palestinian people, civilians that are pulled up from the rubble every every day. But let me know down below, do you agree with Dave Smith? Have you ever heard a plausible argument that they've given for Netanyahu supporting Hamas? You know, despite the fact that Hamas is the most barbaric entity in the world to them. Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, also subscribe to Dave Smith, and please consider joining the channel as a member. If you click the join button below, you can help support the channel, and in return, I'll grant you access to all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.